Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome to Mondays with Mrhappy, aka Mrhappy Mondays, the weekly Q&A show where you ask me questions and I answer them. Okay, we have a day for patch 5.3. Thus, I have committed that this week I'm going to get off my lazy ass and stop taking my little vacation from creating a whole lot of content for the channel. It's going to feel a lot more like a normal week with a few still abnormal ones because in regards to things like State of the Realm, there probably still won't be enough content to do one of those every week over the next several. I've got like 5 weeks and a day by the time you guys see this until August 11th. But there's even just things that aren't 14 related. There's a bunch of things I've been just waiting to do or just not happy with the videos. I'm finishing those. I'm going to be working on some of the stuff that we've come to expect that hasn't come in a while. And so I'm pretty pumped. It's like little motivation week, I've been calling it. Hell, I even logged in the 14, been doing Party Finder raids just because I haven't played it in like a month and a half. And I'm feeling good about that. So that's where I'm at right now. That's my mood right now. So we're on a high mood right now, just blaze. So let's get into the Q&A on that note. Before we do, though, of course, we have to thank our patrons over on Patreon, whose names are scrolling on the screen right now. We actually had, I just remembered, like right now, and we had some new ones. We had Fragale, which was a new standard sponsor. And is there anyone else that I totally forgot? We also had a Cameron, and we also had somebody else change theirs, Hohir, I think that's the pronunciation. They changed theirs to a premium thank you. And then it looks like we had another premium sponsor right here who actually didn't give me a name for their shout out. They just said, thanks for all the work you've been putting into this. This may not be much, but hopefully this helps a little bit. Listen, nobody owes me anything on that Patreon. That Patreon literally just supports the YouTube channel, and the YouTube channel hasn't been doing much. So your kind words are appreciated, but don't feel obligated. I'll just say thank you, because what else can I say at that point? We also have our patrons of Darkness, Khuja, Cross on Jenova, and Kurenai Oni, who you guys are used to it by now, have gone above and beyond for the channel over on Patreon. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of our patrons. And thank you to everyone tuning in. Also, thank you to our question askers. Let's see what we got this week. First question, hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Mrhappy, how's it going? I'm doing all right. You doing all right? I'm doing all right. I'm replaying 2.0 on a new character. With the downtime between patches, I came across something I don't think I ever learned the answer to. Did we ever find out exactly what happened to the Isle of Val? Yes, we did. Eureka. Eureka is the entire story of the Isle of Val, what happened to it, what it actually is, and what it was housing. So I guess I don't really need to go too much more into the rest of this. You're just recapping some of the 2.1 stuff to 3.1 stuff even. And yeah, if you want to know more about what happened to the students of Baldesion and the Isle of Val, Eureka, that's what you're looking for. We got some juicy text on these first few questions. Hashtag Mondays with Mrhappy. Hey, Haps, fairly new player here, though, with plenty of hours in the game because of quarantine. Hey, at least you're enjoying yourself. First time asker. I've leveled all, welcome, by the way. I've leveled all my combat classes to at least 50. Oh, God bless your soul. First I was Paladin, picked up Astro, been leveling Scholar. Notice it plays pretty differently from Astro, and I'm really struggling to figure out how to get better at the job. My tanks seem to go down a fair bit in dungeons, and it feels pretty bad. Yeah, Scholar, so one big thing I see a lot of Scholars do is they rely too much on just outright Eloquiums. Now, I will say this. The level 50 to 60 experience is always kind of rough because you do run into tanks who are kind of in the same boat as you. For every tank you're thinking, oh, I let them die, there's a tank who honestly just didn't help themselves. People who don't use cooldowns efficiently, people who just stack them all at once, people who just press them randomly without any sort of idea of when to press them, and people who don't press them at all. You have to consider that while you're also considering your actual Scholar play. But I will say that at the early levels, that doesn't seem too much out of the norm. You pretty much can, if your tank's getting absolutely trucked, most people will alternate between an Eloquium and a Physic, and your Fairy will throw you a few heals. You Whispering Dawn, of course, that's for everybody, but it's also on the tank as well. And then eventually you'll get things that are great. You'll get Lustrate for a nice big burst heal on the tank. You'll get Excog that you can place it on them at the start of a pull, and then when they fall below 50% HP the first time, they'll just get a bunch of health. You'll be able to get crit Adlos on demand. You'll be able to get the Fairy Tether. You're missing a lot of things that come after the fact. So yeah, so I guess I like to spend a lot of time spamming Lustrate and emergency tactics. Doesn't seem to be working. Yeah, I don't know. It's starting to sound like you're just getting bad tanks, because if you're spamming these things and they're dying, that's not good on their front. It could also just be the DPS are so bad, the pulls are taking so long, both you and the tank are running through all your resources. There's a lot of different layers to it. So, I mean, yeah, you're still missing some healing tools, but try throwing, one thing that might even help you a little bit, throwing a Eloquium on the tanks between pulls, like while they're running up to the next one before they actually pull. That helps a little bit with the very start. Gives you a little bit of time to DPS, gives you a little bit of time to catch your bearings, but pay more close attention to what the tanks in your parties are actually doing to see if they're using cooldowns and if And if there's a correlation between your tank not having a cooldown and you burning through all your buttons. So back to me, I'd say in a future week, take what I've said about what the tanks are doing, what the DPS are doing, and continue doing what you're doing, and tell me if anything evolves, because I might actually have a better answer if you better understand what's actually happening in these individual parties. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hi. Hope you're doing just fine. Thumbs up from me. Hopefully the same for you. I just read a post on the subreddit about people talking on their experiences on the JP data center, and I've been having these thoughts for a while now. You think a cross-datacenter, party finder, duty finder, data center visit would be possible? They've already said they're working on it. They said it's very difficult. There's a lot of hoops to jump through because of the way that the infrastructure is done. But they also said they think they know a way they can do it. They haven't updated us on it since then, but that's very possible. Now, I will say this. It wouldn't surprise me to see that happen between like all the NA servers kind of having like a mega server that connects their cross party finder, cross server party finders, whatever. And then Europe has one and GP has one. It gets a little more complicated. In fact, it gets a lot more complicated when you have servers in entirely different locations, like, you know, we do with the different regions of the world. So I don't know if they'll ever close that gap entirely, where even the across the world, you can go wherever you want, just because of server locations, because of latency changes, things like that. But we should get, I'm expecting, not confirmed, predicting 6.0 will have something along this line, at least for the individual regions. All right, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hey, Haps. Hello. A longtime viewer, first-time asker. Welcome to the weekly Q&A. I think he doesn't remember. Well, you know what? We're even, because I don't remember either. I know you said there wasn't any hints to the next job coming out, but trying to word this in a not really spoilerific way. Could it be possible that a certain someone from the Eden raid hints at being towards a time mage? So I will say this, there are actually more references to time mage in the game than you might otherwise notice. Eden, I know exactly what you're referring to. That wouldn't be a surprise at all, but it doesn't really lean towards a job, more like towards a certain concept of power. It's something that's possible, you know, so of course that puts that thought into your head. There's another case where there's over back in Heaven's Ward, the Hildebrand side story quest has a lot of hints towards stuff like Time Mage, and that's really old at this point. It's why no specific hint is kind of like a hint that it's on the horizon. But the establishment that this type of magic exists always leaves the door open. You know, it's not really that far-fetched to go like, oh, you know, Time Mage is possible. What there isn't is any sort of direct tease that like it's going to become a player-related job. Like, if you look back, you know, we have Yugiri, which heavily teased Rogue and Ninja at Thancred as well. If you look back, Alisei was a big hint towards Red Mage. And we've seen other things. We had Gosetsu as a hint towards Samurai. We have these characters that are very ingrained in the main story. They get these kind of mysterious tools that we don't really understand, and they aren't explained in any way. But they set up this like future of, hey, we're going to have this. Time as an element has kind of always been there, and it's a big part of Shadowbringers as well. So they're not setting it up in the same way, but I will say that's a door that's always open. I don't think it's unreasonable to think it could happen. And honestly, I hate the questions where people say, what do you think of this idea? Because I don't really feel like my input it's not like a valuable input in the discussion. But of course, I'm someone who has ideas like those all the time. And Time Mage is one that's always on the top of my noggin as a healer. So I don't really like any of those questions. Maybe I do a video on it. Because I think I think instead of invoking a discussion, just sharing. I think the reason why those questions even come to me, complete tangent, is because people like sharing their ideas. I know that feeling. I'm someone who always sits and has those theories and ideas, and I like to think about, you know, the scope of video games and the design and the infrastructure, and all those things are incredibly interesting to me. It's why a lot of my answers are not simple yeses or nos. They're a little more complicated than that, because I think about it on so many different layers. And so the reason I don't end up liking those questions is because those layers aren't there. It's just a simple, what do you think? But sharing those thoughts you have with people it is a fun experience. I get why people ask those kind of questions. So for your question in particular, doors open, and we can follow up on this in the future when we find out what we're actually getting. Hashtag, oh man, there's a lot of text in this one. Hashtag Mr. Happy of Mondays, cat face. I guess I call that cat face. There's no whiskers, but it counts. Hey, Happy, hope you're doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Been a while since I asked my last question. Feel free to skim through most of it. Yeah. I like how at the beginning of writing it, you said, if I forget to shorten it. Then I see the rest of it, and I'm like, they forgot. So fortunately, the question is actually laid out here. Ever felt that Savage is becoming more stagnant as of late, and do you think Square's knowledge of FF logs might be contributing to how they've designed this raid series? No, they don't care. They don't care about that stuff. They just come up with ideas. So one thing that this raid tier in particular has is it has an above average difficulty initial fight. You know, E5 has been a headache for a lot of people, and most of the time people breeze through E6 and E7 right after that. And then E8, hard stop for a lot of people. I think a lot of people like to compare the raid tiers between each other. I don't feel like if you were to look at this raid tier on its own, if you were to take any individual element out of it, you can pick out things you like, don't like, but in a vacuum, it's still an overall fairly well-designed raid tier. There's a few different ways to approach a lot of different mechanics. We're seeing good strategy variety, and honestly, that's kind of a healthy design aspect to have. Even if you're going to make something super punishing, when there's only one correct way to do it, it's usually the less interesting of the mechanics. When there's a lot of different ways and people like to try and take the time to find what is most efficient, even if the answer at the end is nothing too thrilling, looking at UE7, it generally speaks to a healthier raid design. And I feel that healthier raid design oftentimes is less fun to people who are on the masochism end like I am. Because when it's healthier, it generally also means that people with the know-how, with the time, with the skill will barrel through it, and it's not going to be super interesting for them to do it over and over again. Whereas when you have unhealthy raid fights where there's a lot of randomness, there's almost no predictability to it, and any single pull can just go south just because of the randomness of a mechanic, then that speaks to unhealth. Some would argue like Rampant is a little bit like that because of who gets the orbs and who actually gets the tethers. But it's I don't mean it quite like that kind of randomness. That's like a healthy level of randomness versus an unhealthy level where there's absolutely no predictability to the encounters. And we've gotten more and more healthy, I guess is the best way to put it. And if you've been doing them for years and years and years now, you've seen it all. So the healthier it is, the less random it is, the less chaotic it is, odds are the less fun you're having because you've seen these things before. You're just connecting dots, and they're just dots that are, it's like the same set of dots on a page, you're just connecting them in a different order. I can't really think of a better way to explain it. Because I can name a ton of really boring encounters. I look at, you actually listed Guardian here. Sigmascape was so bad of a raid tier. Guardian was boring as hell. Chatternook was only fun because you just got to be an FF Logs machine. Otherwise, it was such a boring fight. Phantom Train, not super interesting. Honestly, Phase 1 Kefka, I thought was super boring. And I'm not a huge fan of anything outside of Forsaken 1 and 2 on God Kefka. At least the auto attacks, unlike Neo X Death. And honestly, even looking back, like Alt-Roy and Catastrophe, like Catastrophe was okay. Alt-Roy was just the bottom barrel disaster, and Halicarnassus was really good. Midgard Sormer, I really liked Midgard Sormer, but I'd argue that a lot of that fight I'm not like super engaged. And Chaos in 011 and 012. 012, first part of 012 is okay. The second half after Hello World 2 in the second phase is not super interesting. So I think there's elements to it, but a lot of it's just taste. How long you've been doing it, if you've done Ultimate and have that degree of satisfaction from that difficulty of content. So many different things that I think healthy raid design just gets more boring for higher skilled players than unhealthy raid design, which allows them to kind of just feel like they're constantly being tested, if that makes sense. All right, I don't even remember what the actual question was on the last one, so let's go on to the next one. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Hap, hope you're having a good week. It's been solid. I think this week will be an even better week, so thank you. This question is going to sound stupid and selfish. You know what? I'll say this. If you have a stupid and selfish question and you call it stupid and selfish, you immediately have more respect from me from people who ask it and then think everyone else around them is the asshole. I've seen that people with the legend title can barely do mechanics and EX fights and it makes me devalue the title a lot. With more ultimate fights coming out and the guides following after first few clears, you think ultimate fight should be guideless? It's not really a possible thing, as in no one can make a guide for the fight. I don't even know if stupid and selfish is really the right word for this, because the number of people who have it is really small. You're saying 1 to 3%. I think T has like a 5. Well, I guess it depends, because people do go back and clear them, and there are a lot of people who have it on their alts. But one of two things is happening to you, and I'm gonna explain to you both sides of this spectrum. The one side is, I hope the side you're not encountering, is the people who buy clears. I hate to break it to all of you. All of those party finders that you guys see that are selling T and selling ultimates, they're selling it for real money. And there are people who are buying it. Because I see people actually with those titles in the same situation that you're describing. I'm like, that didn't happen. There's no way. They're doing like the worst anyone's ever done. There's no way. It happens a lot. They're there because people buy it. And it's probable that you've actually encountered a good bit of this. If you, instead of thinking about guideless, cracking down on sales would be the thing that you'd actually want more, because then it would probably be more realistic at that 1 to 3% clear rate. Now, on top of that, there is the other side, and this is the side that's, how do I describe it? This is the side that just doesn't care. And it's a group of people who 100% cleared it legitimately. They went through with a group of 8. They've gotten it. They have logs on it. Cool. And they're playing either a job they don't care about, or they're just kind of bored, so they need to take higher risks in order to get any satisfaction out of the gameplay, and that usually leads to deaths. I run with groups of people who have done ultimates, savages, top 10 clears, and they'll still meme in savage encounters and extreme encounters, because it's just like, it's the only way to derive any degree of pleasure from the content that isn't to the same degree of challenging as something like an ultimate or a week 1 raid tier. I hope that's not what you're encountering. I have a feeling it's actually a little bit of both categories that you're encountering, but God, it's going to be guideless. It doesn't really make sense, because ultimate's one of those things you can have a guide. It doesn't clear that fight for you. You still got to really put the work in. Doesn't matter how many times you read a wormhole guide. When you're in that fight, you're, 10 minutes deep into an encounter that's 16 to 17 minutes long, and the pressure's on, and you haven't been there all. That guide is only getting you so far. You're still going to screw it up, almost definitely, until you've had enough practice runs, you've run it, simulated it in your head enough times, whatever it takes for you to actually learn it. You're going, that's going to be what happens. No, I don't think it makes any sense to ask for anything to be guideless. I just think that you're encountering both ends, those far ends of the spectrum of people who actually have legend titles. Hashtag Mrhappy Monies. Hey, Haps. Hi. How you doing? I'm doing okay. Long-time viewer, first-time asker. Welcome. We've had quite a few first-time askers as of late. I was wondering if you were thinking about making more of those analysis videos like you did for Uwu. Studied up on your video and was able to clear it within a month. Well, that's good to hear. I usually learn stuff quicker by watching things and explaining. So I'm glad that you touched on this. So first we'll take this question here. I was looking for Ukab or T, didn't do it. Ukab I cleared with a mixed group of friends. So one person had cleared it dozens of times. That was the raid leader. 4 of them had cleared it once when it first came out in the first few weeks, and then never cleared it again. Myself, the bard, and one of the tanks had never cleared it at all, but had varying levels of progression. I had progressed up to 4th trio before that point, so it was like 10 strike I hadn't done, and then anything 10 strike on I hadn't done. And then with T, I progged with a day 1, week 1 prog group all the way through to, I think we got to beta in the last phase, like a single pull. But that group, everything it all fell apart. We were all together. At the end of the first week, someone was kicked. Then the day after that, somebody left. Then at the end of that week, somebody else left. And then I said, you know what? I really don't feel like building a static or rebuilding this and restarting and reteaching. I think I'll just take a break from Ultimate. I eventually had a friend who I raided with. I was one of the people I raided with in Uwu. And I think we did Alphascape together too. And so we were week 1 that. He said, hey, we need a range. Do you still need a clear? And I said, yeah. And they didn't know I'd already been to beta. Like, oh, so you've already beaten the fight pretty much. And then, yeah, that took a few hours, and then I had that clear. But because it wasn't like a prog from beginning to end, all streamed, all that, I felt like there's steps that were skipped. Like I could break those fights down, I could analyze them, but it almost didn't feel fair to break something down and analyze a fight that I had such disjointed experiences with, where I had like a 5-month gap or so, no, not even 5 months, like a 3-month gap between my initial prog into Ukab and then when I actually cleared it with a completely different set of people. And then in T, where it was pretty much the same thing, where we did 2 weeks straight, so almost the whole fight, but I didn't actually clear it till like a month after that. So I never ended up doing any content on those because with that kind of experience with it, your actual view of the mechanics and how you think of them, it changes a lot. And I didn't feel like it's a fair analysis as opposed to somebody like Sphia, who, you know, world firsted it, and in those 3-4 days I got to talk about, you know, what their thought process was, how they broke things down. That's a much more interesting watch. And with Uwu, I had that experience, but I didn't have that same experience with the other two. That being said, I am looking into doing some expanding of how I do my guide content. I want to go back to doing week 1 guides. I've tried doing this thing where I slow down the guide making, I wait till all the strategies are figured out, and I just compile what are the most common ones. It really just doesn't do well. No one cares. People have already set their minds on how they're going to do it. The party finders already got set ways. Watch this video, watch that video. Do it week 1 and then make addendums to it. Put little eyes in the top right corner that say new strategy for this mechanic. Click here and make it an unlisted video that goes off to an updated way. That's what we're looking to do now. And so we can get the best of both worlds. Also, these talk through style videos on top of the normal guide. We want to do these. So expect to get more of those and expect to get exactly what you're hoping for. Plans for the next Ultimate Fight Analysis video when there's another Ultimate, probably. One that I can experience from beginning to end without any rocks in between. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. I'm actually a little thirsty. Hello, Haps. I hope you're well. I hope the same for you too. I'm just a little thirsty. I'm an old hand with MMOs, but I'm new to 14 and trying to get a feel for developer responsiveness, bug fixes, and the like. Legacy of its early development and Realm Reborn fixes to make that a tricky thing. As an example, the rigging of a common tank chestplate model is broken on Highlander women and with the right pauldron sitting at a strange angle. I started playing right before 5.2 and I don't know whether that's a long-standing bug or a new one, but either way, the patch didn't fix it. Is it normal for things like animations and rigging to break? Just going to fix such things in a reasonable time. This is not a question for me. I'll just be upfront because I play a Lalafell and I don't care about clipping or breaking or anything like that. I don't care about glamour. I never look at the armor. I never look at what's broken, what's fixed. It needs to kind of just be in my face or I won't notice it. So this is not the kind of question that I can answer. I'll leave it in the video just so I can be clear that this is not something that I don't even pay attention to the bug fix section of patch notes. So if there is an issue and they have fixed it, or even if they have, I wouldn't know because I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't even know 90% of those bugs, especially visual ones. But it's also entirely possible that this is intentional and that this is just the way they've decided to make those fit those bodies and that it's not in any way a bug. But I couldn't tell you because I'm not the one who made it and I'm not the one who breaks it down or even tries to understand it. So that's what I got. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't. Sorry. All right, I had to go past a few, but we'll do the lightning round at the end like we have been. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hello. Hi. Hope you're doing fine in this real-life Umbrella era. Same to you, my friend. What do you think of the new FC? What do you think of new FC members asking for help to unsync dungeons? I can understand if they want to catch up to current content and don't want to buy a jump potion, but I'm afraid they're not getting enough practice to play properly. There's one FC member who has even asked someone with a 2-seater mount to escort them through Azus Law. See, that almost sounds like somebody who's already done it and just wants to get it done with. So if that's somebody who has never played, it's their first experience, that's really weird. The fact that he would even think about that as a new player, that just screams to me as somebody who's already done it and not somebody who is actually new to the game. So I don't know. They might be new to your FC, but are they really new to the game? It's just too much knowledge. It's too much forethought to think of that even. I think it is lazy. I think it's understandable that if you don't want to do the story, you just want to buy a jump potion. I don't always agree with the choice, but I think it's a reasonable, A to B. And if you're doing lower level dungeon, like, I don't understand, why would you? That's just because they don't want to wait in queue or like deal with random people. They mostly want to play like solo or only with friends. Yeah, it is a really weird thing. I don't really have a specific thought because I don't think it's inherently harmful because you still have so much to learn in the higher level dungeons and the higher level content that you really just need to, have the basics of combat. You need to understand how to hold aggro as a tank, how to AoE, when to use your cooldowns. Healers need to, start practicing DPS and, how much healing do they really need to cast. And DPS need to actually learn their rotation, which can drastically change over several levels. So I would say that if this is an actual brand new player, they've never played before, then I would personally tell them not to do it. And if they ask, I wouldn't help them, to be honest. If it was somebody who is just leveling an alt or something, then yeah, this is a completely normal thing. So it really depends on which category they're falling into. One with not a lot of text. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Hi, Haps. Hello. How you doing, dude? I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. So not a Final Fantasy question. That's perfectly fine. I notice you're a BioShock fan. Hell yeah. Super excited for the next one. How about you? Simple question. I try not to just judge a game because it's it belongs to the franchise that I enjoy. I like Final Fantasy as a franchise. I hate Final Fantasies 2 and 3 like a lot. And I don't have any particular feelings towards 8 or 9. They're not like anywhere high on my list. Like, I don't just say, oh, it's Final Fantasy. I like it. It's kind of the same with BioShock. I like all the BioShock games, fortunately. Much to a lot of people's surprise, Infinite actually kind of stands above, even though I definitely say it's got less of the things that make the earlier BioShocks kind of not revolutionary, but stand outish. You know, it kind of feels like it's a course that's run, but I really love Elizabeth and the interactions between the characters throughout that game. Something about it fascinates me more than the other two. But I'm not going to say I'm excited for the next one until I see some of it. So when that happens, I'll actually have an opinion on it, but I just don't want to have an opinion about something I only know by name and not by quality. And that's important to me. Hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays. Heya, 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 Mr. Haps. Heya, heya, heya to you too. I always thought that 14 doesn't have enough official merch. You ain't wrong. What kind of ideal merch would you like Square Enix to make? Any figure of a character or a boss you would like the most? I tend to mostly collect shirts because behind me you can see the shelf. Honestly, I don't feel like making more shelf space to collect things like collector's editions or figurines or whatnot. I like to travel light. Sometimes I like having these things because they're just kind of cool to have, but a shirt I can wear on any given day, any given week, any given month, I enjoy. And while they don't have official like merch that they sell very often that has shirts, they do for like for fan fests, not like we'll have those, and for any live events where they do like I Beat t-shirts and stuff like that. So quite frankly, I'd want more like shirts and apparel, just apparel in general. But you're right. It's kind of like, it reminds me of League of Legends. League of Legends did so little merchandising for so long. And even now, I don't know how well they're merchandising what should be a really obvious thing to go ham on merchandise with. But I also don't even keep up with how much merch exists for Final Fantasy or 14, either or. So I can't even say if they're doing better now than they used to or whatever. It's just not something I'm knowledgeable enough about. But for me, it's mostly apparel for any sort of merchandise. Alrighty then, hashtag Mr. Happy Mondays, longtime listener, first time caller. Hello to you too, by the way. Everyone skips the hello. In my opinion, the difficulty in adding a new healer is finding an aspect of healing they can focus on. White Mage has big upfront numbers, Scholar's Shields, Astro has the ability to focus on either. Is there any aspect of healing that you think a healing class could focus on and make its own? Past, I've thought about maybe storing up overhealing to fill a gauge, or a healer focus on clearing status effects. Okay, so this kind of falls in the line of what do you think question, but it actually, I guess it has enough of a narrative that I can approach it. So I'll make my answer two-part. First, you're focusing kind of a lot on the result of what the healing achieves. Ultimately, what healing needs to achieve is people being alive. And then what you have is the flavor of how people are kept alive. Now, of course, there's, standard upfront damage, healing over time, shields. And it's not that those are the end of it, but those are kind of always what the result is. People's health goes up, and that can only happen in so many different ways and in so many different permutations. So what I like to think more is, how does a healer achieve their power, and what does that power actually achieve? What do they gain? What do they lose? And we see that a lot with our current healers. They all have a fairly simple formula individually, but they have these little aspects that require little gameplay quirks between them. And those are the important things to focus on. Now, to actually answer the question, going back on an earlier one, I said I always have thoughts about Time Mage, and kind of sort of what you're saying here, storing up overhealing, I like to think of more like storing time. Like you can actually save time and then use it to manipulate certain things like your healing or your dots. And a game that actually exemplifies that, I'm releasing a video I think the same day as this, a review on an RPG called Chris Tales, which allows you to manipulate time, where you can send enemies forward and back in time, and it has adverse effects. One of the most notable ones is you can force all of a dot's damage to happen at once, or you can have all of like your healing over time happen at once. So you can force things to happen in, by manipulating time. And I feel like that's something you could do if you have like a heal over time on somebody. Time Mage could consume, one time gauge, and they could consume the whole dot at once or the whole heal over time at once for one big heal. Something along those lines makes a lot of sense to me. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. I don't want to go too much into it because, again, I don't really like getting these questions, so I don't want to dive into it myself. But that's the kind of theme that I imagine. And so using an overhealing, the only thing I don't like about an overheal to fill a gauge is that when you're playing well, you're doing very little overhealing. And you'll never deliberately overheal just to save gauge up. So it's like promoting. It's not taking what is considered bad gameplay and making it good. It's almost promoting bad gameplay to access your power. And that's not something I particularly agree with. Now, as a job mechanic that's like just in case, as long as it's not the core mechanic, I don't think it's an inherently bad idea. But for me, Time Mage, the stored time mechanic, there's a lot of ways you can fiddle with that in your own mind. That's kind of how I imagine the power being accessed on something like a Time Mage. Hashtag Mondays with Mr. Happy. Hey, Haps, how you doing? Hope all is well with you and yours. Quick and easy question for you today. Well, thank you. I hope the same for you. And let's get to the question. In Defu, I haven't played Defu in a while, but man, I'm always itching, but I don't want to feel that gotcha desire. That's why I'm doing shiny hunting in Pokemon, because it gets rid of that gotcha desire for me. When I summon a friend unit, what is the factor that determines whether I get 3 or 5 turns? So it depends on if you're saying summon a friend unit. The word friend is the key thing. If you're summoning a unit of someone you don't follow and they don't follow you, you get less turns. That's when you get the 3-turn sad face. 5 turns is if you and the other person both follow each other. It's why occasionally checking who's following you and following them back if they have a unit that you actually like is highly recommended if you're playing multiplayer in Defu, because you want those 5 turns. You never want to bring a unit that doesn't have 5 turns, unless it's on something so insignificant that honestly it probably won't even last that many turns, like summon board farming, if you've already got like mega OP characters that can just burn through the summon boards as it is. So that's what it is. It's the status of whether or not the person you're summoning follows you and if you follow them too. All right, another short one. Hashtag Mr. Happy Monday. Just today. Just one day. Hi, Mr. Happy. How are you doing? I'm doing swell. I hope the same for you. Is it better to play and level up all classes in a row or focus on one class then level up the rest? Realistically, you don't have to level more than one class if you really don't want to. Most people would recommend leveling at least all the jobs within the same role. And I think that's an okay piece of advice, just so you're a little flexible. But I mean, you don't even have to do that. If you are going to level more than one job, my personal recommendation, level all the jobs that share armor first. If you're leveling tanks, level all your tanks in a row. If you're leveling healers, level all your healers in a row. So you can get rid of the old gear. You don't have to hold on to it, but you also had it for the actual leveling process, and you free up a ton of space doing so. Instead of leveling a healer, then a tank, then a caster, then a range, then a melee, and then, leveling a melee that has a different set of gear, because you have striking and maiming and scouting, and it's like, you don't want to have to do all that. So that would be my personal recommendation. All right, that was actually the last question that is not in the speed round. Now we should probably do a question that is. Now let's do like a speed round for the remaining questions. Let's see. One of them is, does your rotation affect dance partner, or does dance partner operate in its own entity? No, they have nothing to do with each other. It's a flat damage buff, and your dance partner's abilities occasionally give you extra esprit. That's all that's going on there. Somebody who also didn't like Inquisition, I'm glad to hear that. It's me describing TSM as the same way Jets and Mets fans do. I don't know, I'm not much of a sports fan, so I'll take your word for that one. Let's see. Having a tough time pugging Savage. If you could give any tips. Persistence. Party Finder can be a fickle mistress, and you will hate life, but eventually you will win. You will just hate it by the time you get there. So best of luck, because there's not really anything else to offer with that. What else? Let's see. No, I already answered that one. Looking to improve on being a healer as a second main. I have trouble keeping people alive. How should I do it? I mean, healing is all about thinking about the mechanic before it happens and not reacting to it after it happens. So what you need to do is look at a mechanic, look who's taking damage, how much damage they're taking, and think about your abilities and how they interact with that. If you know big AoE damage is coming and everyone can be together, you lay down a star in advance so you can blow the star up, or it can detonate automatically when the damage itself is actually going to happen. The same with placing up shields as a healer, whether you're Nocturnal Astro or a Scholar. If you know there's a big AoE, you want to catch a time when people are missing a little bit of health, but you can also give them a shield after the fact. If you can't, great, they still need the shield, but you also have to think about that for Sacred Soils. In the case of Astro, you have the bubble instead of Sacred Soil, so it's about thinking ahead, realistically. Let's see, what else is there? I know there's a few questions that I definitely went past. Are we going to get a level cap increase? Yeah, so we get a level cap increase every expansion. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually they do like a level squish like World of Warcraft is doing in Shadowlands, but yeah, we get one in expansions, not in the patches in between. Let's see. I know there's definitely more. There's the legend question that we had earlier. That's another one I already answered. That's the job hint one, the stories from the JP data center. Somebody thanking me for my content for all these years. They say that I'm the only reason they even play 14. Thank you for the kind words. I've seen it. I've seen your question. There's the scholar question from earlier. Someone just asked me if I'm willing to help them clear Savage. I just joined Party Finders now. That's what I've been doing the past few days. I don't have a static. I haven't had a static. We had a static for clearing this last tier week 1, and then we all went our separate ways because it was not feasible for us to raid together because we were in like 5 different time zones from all edges of the world. I thought there were more questions that I wanted to take. Why do I feel like I just went right past things? I could have swore there was something else. Oh, there's one here that I definitely skipped over. Why is the Warrior of Light not primal yet? Because we're an individual. We already have ether. We're so ether dense as it is. There's the theory the Warrior of Light is a primal. Like they straight up are one. And that we were just like an extension of Hydaelyn, who's also officially a primal. But there's no evidence to support that. So it's a fun thing to think about. But outside of being an entire massive ether and people going, yeah, Warrior of Light, we've never really had like a real primal-esque experience. We still have enemies that stand opposite to us that don't have any sort of tempering or any sort of immunity to tempering kinds of powers. I also noticed that you labeled your first question as 1 and never asked a second question. So unless I'm missing the number somewhere in here. I think that is the last one. The rest are just kind of comments about different answers from last week. And I've seen there's some people that are actually answering them in the comment sections under those things. But I don't think there's anything else here. So with that, that's going to be my last question I answer for this week's episode of Mondays with Mr. Happy. If you have a question, be sure to ask it in the comment section of the video below. And this week, just so you know, Chris Tales demo review on Monday. On Tuesday, we are going to have the Fae Tactics demo review, even though the demo got taken off Steam for some reason. And on Wednesday, we're going to have a Mortal Shell demo review, or I guess closed beta review, because they opened closed beta to everyone randomly. So be on the lookout for those, and we're going to be getting to work on some other 14 videos that I've been talking about for some time now. But thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Thank you to our patrons, and I'll see you next week. Until then, take care.